Thank you very much for coming out for this talk. I want to thank Barbara and Wyatt, of course, and the staff, Megan and Adam, and my wonderful workshop. Some of them I see. We've had a wonderful workshop, and also, of course, my great-hearted teaching companion, Tim O'Brien. I intend to be brisk, and I hope to be helpful about the opening paragraph. And I do know we talk about this all the time, but I'm hoping maybe, well, you'll see things perhaps slightly differently. Anyway, the opening paragraph and the contention that the story in any successful story is contained in its opening gestures. To go further, the story is directed by a sentence found most always in the opening paragraph. The writer knows which sentence it is that informs her story, and that sentence will serve as a reminder to the writer of what the story is about. A writer would do well to look back at what has been written, to consider the driving sentence and the ways in which that sentence has been rewritten, deepened, darkened over the course of the story. Writing as a recursive act. It is not at all uncommon to forget what it was that put your fiction in motion, and a common error as a way to fix this is to forge ahead by addition. More action, a new character, a change in scenery, but it's by subtraction that stories are made. The traditional architecture of Flannery O'Connor's grand stories are a good place to start in pointing out the theory of the story contained and the story forecast in the opening paragraph. And I would like to say that you can take up every one of her stories and find this is true. They're always, it's always all there in the opening paragraph. I'm going to get the great pleasure in this craft talk of at least reading these paragraphs. A good man is hard to find. The grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. She wanted to visit some of her connections in East Tennessee, and she was seizing at every chance to change Bailey's mind. Bailey was the son she lived with, her only boy. He was sitting on the edge of his chair at the table, bent over the orange sports section of the journal. "Now look here, Bailey," she said. "See here, read this." And she stood with one hand on her thin hip and the other rattling the newspaper at his bald head. "Here this fellow that calls himself the Misfit is loose from the federal pen and headed toward Florida. And you read here what it says he did to these people. Just you read it. I wouldn't take my children any direction with a criminal like that loose in it. I couldn't answer to my conscience if I did." The first time I read this paragraph, I said, oh, no. You're not really going to take me to the Misfit, are you? But, of course, that's exactly what she does. The old lady, she takes her children on the road to the Misfit. By the time the story ends, the old lady's recognition of the Misfit goes well beyond appearance as she saw it in the newspaper. She feels connected to him in a moment of grace when she sees him as one of her babies. "You're one of my own children," are her last words. The old lady has traveled from nettling her only boy, Bailey, in the morning with the threat of the misfit to embracing Bailey's killer. He happens to be wearing the dead man's shirt. And she reaches out to the misfit. She touches his shoulder. He recoils in the instant and shoots her. And the title, A Good Man is Hard to Find, as many of you will remember, comes back. She would have been a good woman if there'd been somebody around to shoot her every day. That's true of most of us, I imagine. No. Okay. All right. I'm going to, sometimes profitable game is to see how much of the essential information, character, setting, problem, tone, point of view, can be conveyed in as few words as possible. And a good example is from a mid-20th century master short story writer, John Updike. John Updike, who once required no introduction. He isn't being read right now. When he was alive, his name was common currency. He just needs to be dead longer. I mean, I do think that's true. If you know, that happens. It takes maybe about 20 years, maybe a little more. In any event, A and P. In walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door, so I don't see them until they're over by the bread. The one that caught my eye first was the one in the plaid green two-piece. She was a chunky kid with a good tan and a sweet, broad, soft-looking can with those two crescents of white just under it, where the sun never seems to hit, at the top of the backs of her legs. I stood there with my hand on a box of hi-ho crackers, trying to remember if I rang it up or not. I ring it up again, and the customer starts giving me hell. She's one of these cash registers, watchers, a witch about 50 with rouge on her cheekbones and no eyebrows, and I know it made her day to trip me up. She'd been watching cash registers for 50 years and probably never seen a mistake before. Okay. So, all right. In this story, this very famous story, A&P, Updike manages to fit in all that is needed in 11 words, counting the title A and P, which is an acronym for the Great Atlantic Pacific Tea Company, a supermarket chain, 156 years long in business, started in the mid-19th century, and was the largest U.S. retailer of any kind in 1965. This Updike story is from 1961. A supermarket, of course, is a most democratic place. In a poem entitled A Supermarket in California and dated Berkeley, 1955, Allen Ginsberg meets Walt Whitman. I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats in the refrigerator and eyeing the grocery boys. I used to think A&P was, as a title, was a cheat, providing setting, but I have come to appreciate it. A&P, a deceptively shrunk term for the universe that it was in mid-20th century America. Okay. So in 9 words, with this, in walk these three girls in nothing but bathing. 9 words, and we have characters, problem, and so forth. Water must be nearby, and the problem is nothing but bathing suits. Means no shoes, and will the three girls be suffered to stay? Tone, by which I mean the attitude of the speaker toward what is being described, is casual. In walk these three girls. Starts as a yarn might. Only point of view is left to be established, which it is in the very first word of the second sentence. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door, so I don't see them until they're over by the bread. First person, then, which reinforces the casual tone of the speaker, and moreover the speaker's clarifying that he doesn't see the girls when they originally enter. It establishes the retrospective quality of the story. The narrator is looking back on an event significant to him, however brief the encounter might have been. One advantage to recalled experience in first person, fanciful elaboration is allowed. You can be philosophic. You can look back and you can say bigger things that you could not if it was just ongoing. So that's this nifty little trick. Another thing is the restrictive setting, short time frame with ambition to deliver the world. This Updike story, just as an exercise for yourselves sometimes when you don't have anything to do, is to see, can I get a really great, interesting opening sentence, and how short can it be, and how much can I get in there, and so forth. And, oh yes, by restrictive setting, I mean not letting yourself get out of the kitchen, not letting yourself get out of the car, and still contriving to find ways of getting out of the car. That's one of the great joys of restrictive setting is the problem solving. It can take you weeks and months, but it's still fun when you do find the solution. All right, so short time frame with ambition to deliver. Updike makes the decision never to go beyond the parking lot of the supermarket, and there only briefly. The time frame is very short. Most of the world is calculated in the store itself. Updike gets outside of the supermarket in the narrator's imagination, which is sparked by the word herring snacks. All of a sudden, I slid right down her voice into her living room. Her father and the other men were standing around in ice cream coats and bow ties, and the women were in sandals picking up herring snacks on toothpicks off a big plate. When my parents have somebody over, they get lemonade. And if it's a real fancy affair, racy, Schlitz in tall glasses with "they'll do it every time" cartoons stenciled on. Updike touches on class disparities, especially as they are experienced in a community with what the narrator describes as a big summer colony out on the point. In the A&P, the three girls are confronted by L'Engle, the manager of the supermarket, who scolds them and makes them blush. "We want you decently dressed when you come in here," L'Engle says, to which the prettiest girl, ruffled, responds that they are decent. She is sore now, that she remembers her place, a place from which the crowd that runs the A&P must look pretty crummy, our narrator says. Now, as the story evolves from this confrontation, the opening sentence, "In walk these three girls in nothing but bathing suits," is profoundly rewritten. The girls, who'd blame them, are in a hurry to get out. So I say, I quit to L'Engle, quick enough for them to hear, hoping they'll stop and watch me, their unsuspected hero. They keep right on going into the electric eye. The door flies open and they flicker across the lot to their car. "In walk these three girls in nothing" now applies to the narrator in the checkout slot. Driven by pride, unseen by the girls, he yet persists in resisting L'Engle for having embarrassed the girls by scolding them. He won't accept L'Engle's explanation that it was the girls who were embarrassing us. And there is truth in what L'Engle says. Yet our narrator goes through with an action he knows he will regret, even as he removes his apron. He quits work he needs and leaves the A&P, makes a clean exit into the summer out of doors. No fumbling around, getting your coat and galoshes. I just saunter into the electric eye in my white shirt that my mother ironed the night before, and the door heaves itself open. In the dumb summer dazzle of the parking lot, he sees, and we see, the mother behind the son and what the job represents. Of course, his grand exit has gone unnoticed. Only he is there to take in the scene as he looks back at the A&P windows and sees L'Engle taking over for him in the checkout, face dark gray, back stiff. In walk these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. Out walks this boy, vulnerable, inwardly naked. He begins to see something much more than the girls. He thinks, and this is the conclusion of the story, he thinks the world will be a harder place for him hereafter. Okay, I'm going to jump to this one. That's what I mean, though. It's profoundly rewritten, very different, wonderful. Anyway, a poetics for bullies. I'm Push the Bully, and what I hate are new kids and sissies, dumb kids and smart, rich kids, poor kids, kids who wear glasses, talk funny, show off, patrol boys and wise guys, and kids who pass pencils and water the plants, and cripples, especially cripples. I love nobody loved. Okay, so we consider a Stanley Elkin story, starting with its title, A Poetics for Bullies. The title is not employed for setting. Rather, it informs the reader of the story's subject, the techniques of bullying, which is inviting as a subject, I think. But equally inviting is the oddly playful pairing of such a fancy word as poetics with bullies. The title might have been Ways to be a Bully, or How to be a Bully, or simply Bullies, or even Bullies, Bullies, Bullies. But the title, A Poetics for Bullies, anticipates high-wire prose. Compare John Updike's A&P setting title to Annie Proulx's setting title, The Bunch Grass Edge of the World. Entirely different, and the prose that follows in Proulx's story is lyrically ambitious. Elkin's title sets up for just such a punch. And the first sentence, when our narrator, the instructor in bullying, introduces himself and articulates his antipathetic relation to his fellows, I'm Push the Bully, and what I hate are new kids and sissies, dumb kids and smart, rich kids, poor kids, kids who wear glasses, talk funny, show off, patrol boys and wise guys, and kids who pass pencils and water the plants, and cripples, especially cripples. A bullying sentence. Catalog or list sentences do overwhelm with their length and density. A pile up of terms, as in new kids and sissies, dumb kids and smart, nice parallel construction, rich kids, poor kids, kids who wear glasses, and now the verb takes over. Wear glasses, talk funny, show off. Now I go back to the original. Patrol boys and wise guys and kids who, and I go back to the verb, pass pencils and water plants, and cripples, especially cripples. Elkin ends on a bully's characteristic aggressive, impolitic, offensive, rule-breaking speech. Who would say such a thing? A bully. The last sentence of the opening paragraph to A Poetics for Bullies is a compressed rewriting of the first. I love nobody loved. Sounds almost epigrammatic with the poet's trick of fitting in the sentence, the same word used as a different part of speech. I love nobody loved. Love is verb and adjective. Pithy sentences such as I love nobody loved can powerfully reveal character. Think of Iago's similar construction that sums him up entire. I am not what I am. In the case of A Poetics for Bullies, the story demands that the sentence, "I love nobody loved," be tested. The old lady says she wouldn't take her family anywhere near the misfit. Test it. She will. Usually when characters start out in the opening and they say, "I always did, I never did, I would never," they're going to do it. It's very simple. So you know, you can almost, well, I'm going to follow my text. Sometimes you get so excited, you know, and then you say things that you shouldn't and all kinds of things. Right. Sorry. Tested. So, push meets. All right, here's "I love nobody loved" forecasts a confrontation. Would push love a loved figure? Push meets such a character in the form of a tall boy with the socially impeccable name of John Williams. Push describes him. His long legs, comfortable in expensive wool, the trousers of a boy who had been on ships, jets, who owned a horse perhaps, who knew Latin. What didn't he know? Somebody made up, like a kid in a play, with a beautiful mother and a handsome father who took his breakfast from a sideboard and picked, even at 14 and 15 and 16, his mail from a silver plate. The interruptions. What didn't he know? And qualifications, even at 14 and 15 and 16, fitted into the catalog sentence, add to its breathless effect. Faced with John Williams, Push considers what he, as a bully, can do. I can duplicate the particular kid's lisp, his stutter, a thickness in his throat. I can parody their limps, their waddles, their girlish runs, their clumsy jumps. What Push can't do is imitate the new boy's formal locutions. Push tries, but discovers he can imitate only defects, only flaws. So, for a time upon meeting, Push listens to John Williams tell stories, speak of jungles, of deserts, of ancient trade routes traveled by strange beasts. John Williams is a most persuasive storyteller. He enthralls, whereas Push threatens. The magic Push practices as a bully is no more than a kid's trick, clever and cruel. Adam and Eve and Punch Me Hard went down to the lake for a swim. Adam and Eve fell in. Who was left? Push me hard, pinch me hard. It's pinch me hard, sorry. Not push me hard, pinch me hard. Hardly a narrative on a level to compete with stories that feature elephants and tigers. Push seeks out this newly arrived prince to find a chink, something he might exploit. Their meeting occurs in the middle of the story. Push is overexcited. Do you live here? What do you do? Will you be in our school? Were you telling the truth? Whereas John Williams, strangely, from the start, deflects his questions. Be quiet, please, he says. There's a woman who's ill, a boy who must study. There's a man with bad bones. An old man needs sleep. John Williams continues to thwart Push in his effort to size up his opponent by responding to Push's questions with the same music. She needs me, he said. I help her, he said. There's a man that's in pain, a woman who's old, a husband that's worried, a wife that despairs. You have to ask yourself, who answers this way? John Williams uses a bully's trick, seductive language. Push, as a lesser practitioner, his Adam and Eve trick he calls sleight of mouth. Understands the bullying use of language and calls out the princely newcomer. You're the bully, Push says, and as he watches John Williams ascend the stairs, he whispers the word. It's set apart from the paragraph, and it is in italics. lover. The word, as I say, in italics, in the middle of the page, recalls, pushes assertion in the story's opening, I love nobody loved. Whether or not push means this, it marks a reversal of I love nobody loved. And it is followed by a challenge as to which of them will prevail in the last half of the story, the bully push or the hero bully, John Williams. When we've talked about that opening and you're moving away from it, you can completely reverse it and perhaps end your story. Or you can get to the center, and by then it's already been rewritten and it's been changed. And then you rewrite it once again at the end. But it's nice to know that. And how do you know that if you've forgotten where you started? You look back. So, all right, so as to which of them will prevail in the last half of the story, the bully push or the hero bully, John Williams. I'm very brave, Push says early in the story. That's a lie about bullies being cowards underneath. If you're a coward, get out of the business. Writing and the writing profession is not for the timid. You can be shy at the party, stay indoors or abed, but on the page you will be best served going down steep roads, finding out places that put you at risk, braving that subject you promised never to broach, saying what no one else would dare say, and cripples, especially cripples. Don't take on the trivial, the easy, the known. Take on what you don't understand, but think about. You do not have to know where your story is going. You shouldn't know. Because if you do, all you're doing is just skittering ahead to get to it. No, sorry, you don't want to do that. Okay, take on what you don't understand. Seriously engaged. Yes, right. Experiences that, when seriously engaged, will lead you to truths about the essentials, sex and death and nature and God. A poetics for bullies may be read as a poetics for fiction writers. The writer as bully. And you are bullies. You have to be. Or the writer as John Williams' seducer. Here's my idea of a seductive way in. Another dead man, not much read right now, but again, I think he will come back. It's Harold Brodkey story, Verona. A young woman speaks. I know a lot. I know about happiness. I don't mean the love of God either. I mean, I know the human happiness with the crimes in it. I love your response. It is the way you feel when you see that. Ah, man, wow. Are you lucky you came on that? All right. The title, you'll notice, of course, serves to provide place and narrator's gender and age. The first paragraph, I know a lot. I know about happiness. I don't mean the love of God either. I mean I know the human happiness with the crimes in it. Oh, what a phrase, what a great space in which to frolic with humans happy in criminal ways. The beauty of this story is how it continues to draw us in and seduce by following its short opening paragraph with 3 one-sentence paragraphs in a row. Appearance on the page counts. A reader likes white space. I mean, who doesn't? A dense opening paragraph is impressive, but it is brick-like and presents a challenge, and the stuff inside the paragraph better be quick to stick. Back to Brodkey's pretty way in. After he says, I know the human happiness with the crimes in it, even the happiness of childhood. I think of it now as a cruel, middle-class happiness. Let me describe one time, one day, one night, and then follows a dense paragraph. So, but it's that unity of time and action, the simplicity of the setup, and human happiness with the crimes in it, and the story begins proper. It is one of these, it's sort of like, here's another idea to consider, as aside just from a restrictive setting, is if you take 3 characters, that's really all you need. And the crimes in this story, we have a mother and a father and a little girl, and the little girl is now an older woman and remembering this story, and they're in Verona. And sometimes Dad understands me, and Mom's out there, and sometimes Mom understands me, and Dad's out there, and sometimes Mom and Dad are there, and I'm way over there. And how do I get them? How do I get them to notice me and do things? But that's essentially the story. In the end, women here will be happy to know the women decide. The women really are the winners. It's a nice ending. All right, so the sentence that drives a story can often be detected for being different as regards the language, its terms and tone. And now I'm going to read, pretty good. I'm going to read the beginning of a story by Leonard Michaels, Murderers. And then I'm going to go through it a bit and look at the clock. And if there's time, because it's profoundly short, I'm going to give myself the great pleasure, and I hope you, of finishing the story Murderers. Here's the opening. It's very, very short because it makes these turns very quickly. When my Uncle Mo dropped dead of a heart attack, I became expert in the subway system. With a nickel, I'd get to Queens, twist and zoom to Coney Island, twist again toward the George Washington Bridge, beyond which was darkness. I wanted proximity to darkness, strangeness. Who doesn't? The poor in spirit, the ignorant and frightened. My family came from Poland and never went any place until they had heart attacks. The consummation of years in one neighborhood, a black Cadillac corpse inside. We should have buried Uncle Mo where he shuffled away his life, in the kitchen or toilet, under the linoleum, near the coffee pot. Anyhow, they were dropping in Henry Street and Cherry Street Blue Lips. The previous winter, it was cousin Charlie, 45 years old, Mo, Charlie, Sam, Adele, a family man, a punch in the chest, fire in the arm. I didn't want to wait for it. I went to Harlem, the Polo Grounds, Far Rockaway, thousands of miles on nickels, mainly underground. Tenements watched me go day after day, fingering nickels. One afternoon, I stopped to grind my heel against the curb. Melvin and Arnold Bloom appeared, then Harold Cohen. Then Harold Cohen. Melvin said, "You step in dog shit?" Grinding was my answer. Harold Cohen said, "The rabbi is home. I saw him on Market Street. He was walking fast." Oily Arnold, 11 years old, began to urge, "Let's go up to our roof." The decision waited for me. I considered the roof, the view of industrial Brooklyn, the Battery, ships on the river, bridges, towers, and the rabbi's apartment. "All right," I said. We didn't giggle or look to one another for moral signals. We were running. In the opening, of course, you have Murderers, which doesn't seem to attach to anything. And it might be something, you might stay with the story because of that title. So, darkness in the story is literal at the beginning, until one afternoon when he runs into his friends who tell him about the rabbi being home, which in context is clearly a signal that they have followed the rabbi's activities before. And they quickly agree to go to a spot of their own with a view of the rabbi's apartment. If the opening paragraph starts underground, the second opens brightly. And I'm going to read, and will occasionally stop and say something. So here it goes. You've got the opening, and you've got the really weird, strange sentence. I wanted proximity to darkness, strangeness. I'm not going to wait for death. I'm going to go out. I'm going to find it. I'm just not going to capitulate that way. So, darkness, strangeness, that's a sentence that drives this story. Second paragraph, after we were running, begins, the blinds were up and curtains pulled, giving sunlight, wind, birds to the rabbi's apartment, a magnificent metropolitan view. The rabbi and his wife never took it, but in the light and air of summer afternoons, in the eye of gull and pigeon, they were joyous. A bearded young man and his young pink wife sacramentally bald, beard and baldy, with everything to see, looked at each other. From a water tank on the opposite roof, higher than their windows, we looked at them. In psychoanalysis, this is the primal scene. To achieve the primal scene, we crossed a ledge 6 inches wide. A half-inch indentation in the brick gave us finger holds. We dragged bellies and groins against the brick face to a steel ladder. It went up to the side of the building, bolted into brick, and up the side of the water tank to a slanted tin roof which caught the afternoon sun. We sat on that roof like angels, shot through with light, derealized in brilliance. Our sneakers sucked hot, slanted metal, palms and fingers pressed to bone in nail heads. So I've gone from underground to the top of a roof with a slanted roof. It's tin, and I'm going to also tell you the tin will come back, and the roof. I've also reversed the title. The title is Murderers. Second paragraph, they're already angels. Now, I have my narrator. The Brooklyn Navy Yard with destroyers and aircraft carriers, the Statue of Liberty putting the sky to the torch, the dull, remote skyscrapers of Wall Street and the Empire State Building were among the wonders we dominated. Our view of the holy man and his wife on their living room couch and floor on the bed in their bedroom could not be improved unless we got closer. But 50 feet across the air was right. We heard their phonograph and watched them dancing. We couldn't hear the gratifications or see pimples. We smelled nothing. We didn't want to touch. For a while, I watched them. Then I gazed beyond into shimmering nullity, gray, blue, and green, murmuring over rooftops and towers. Our narrator is becoming philosophic. You remember, his only answer to stepping in shit was just to grind his heel. Now we're getting philosophical. I had watched them before. I could tantalize myself with this brief ocular perversion, the general cleansing kneel of a view. This was the beginning of philosophy. I indulged in ambience, in space like eons. So what if my Uncle Mo was dead? I was philosophical and luxurious. I didn't even have to look at the rabbi and his wife. After all, how many times had we dissolved stickball games when the rabbi came home? How many times had we risked shameful discovery, scrambling up the ladder exposed to their windows if they looked? We risked life itself to achieve this eminence. I looked at the rabbi and his wife. Today, she was a blonde. I wanted proximity, darkness and strangeness. Remember that line, still ruling the story, because what is stranger for children than sex at an early age when they see it? Today she was a blonde. Bald didn't mean no wig. She had 10 wigs, 10 colors, 50 styles. She looked different, the same, and very good. a human theme in which nothing begat anything and was gorgeous. To me, she was the world's lesson. Aryan yellow slip-through pins about her ears, and olive complexion, mediated yellow hair, and Arabic black eyes. Could one care what she really looked like? What was really the beginning of philosophy? The minute you wondered, she looked like something else, in another wig, another style. Without the wig, she was a baldy bean lady. Today she was a blonde. Not blonde. A blonde. The phonograph blared and her deep loops flowed. Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, and then the thing itself. Choo-choo, Lopez, rumba. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The rabbi stepped away to delight in blonde imagination, twirling an individual. He stepped away, snapping fingers, going high and light on his toes. A short bearded man, balls, a fling, cock shuddering like a springboard. Rumba, 1, 2, 3, ole, vaya, choo-choo. I've gone from Uncle Mo to this. This is joyous. This is grand. I was on my way to spend some time in Cuba, stopped off at Miami. We get the lyrics, la la. Oh, what a rumba they teach, la la, way down in Miami Beach. Oh, what a trumba they teach, way down in Miami Beach. She, on the other hand, was somewhat reserved. A shift in one lush hip was total rumba. He was Mr. Life. You see how far I've come. I'm now with Mr. Life and the world's lesson. She was dancing. He was a naked man. She was what she was in the garment of her soft, essential self. He was snapping, clapping, hopping to the beat. The beat lived in her visible music, her lovely self, except for the wig. Also a watch band that desecrated her wrist, but it gave her a bit of the whorish. She never took it off. Harold Cullen began a cocktail mixer motion, masturbating with 2 fists. Seeing him at such hard, futile work, braced only by sneakers, was terrifying. But I grinned. Out of terror, I twisted an encouraging face. Melvin Bloom kept one hand on the tin, the other knuckled the rumba numbers into the back of my head, nodding like a defective. Little Arnold Bloom chewed his lip and squealed as the rabbi and his wife smacked together. The rabbi clapped her buttocks, fingers buried in the cleft. They stood only on his legs, his back arched, knees bent, thighs thick with thrust. Up, up, up. Her legs wrapped his hips, ankles crossed, hooked for constriction. Oi, 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 she cried. Wig flashing left, right, tossing the Brooklyn Navy Yard, the Statue of Liberty, and the Empire State Building to hell. Arnold squealed. Oi, squealing rubber. His sneaker heels stabbed tin to stop his slide. Melvin said, idiot. Arnold's ring hooked a nail head, and the ring and ring finger remained. The hand, the arm, the rest of him were gone. How fast did that happen? We were just dancing. It was just, they risked life to see this. I'm not going to wait for it. I want proximity to darkness and strangeness. Killing people also in fiction is pretty hard, and to do it so quickly, nifty. We rumbled down the ladder. Oi, 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 she yelled. In a freak of ecstasy, her eyes had rolled and caught us. The rabbi drilled to her quick, and she had us. Now it's repeated in caps. Oi, oi, she yelled above congas going clop, doom, doom, clop, doom, doom. You understand the heavy-handedness of this, but that's not bad. On the way to Cuba, the rabbi flew to the window, a red mouth opening in his beard. Murderers! He couldn't know what he said. Melvin Bloom was crying. My fingers were tearing, bleeding into brick. Harold Cohen, like an adding machine, gibbered the name of God. We moved down the ledge quickly as we dared. Bongos went, and now we were reminded of time because we sort of been out of time. Taka tika taka, taka tika taka. The rabbi screamed, this is all in caps, Melvin Bloom, Philip Leibowitz, Harold Cohen, Melvin Bloom, as if our names screamed this way, naming us where we hung, smashed us into brick. One-line paragraph. Nothing was discussed. New paragraph. The rabbi used his connections. Arrangements were made. We were sent to a camp in New Jersey. We hiked and played volleyball. One day, apropos of nothing, Melvin came to me and said, little Arnold had been made of gold and he, Melvin, of shit. I appreciated the sentiment, but to my mind, they were both made of shit. He's got his answer. Harold Cohen never again spoke to either of us. The counselors in the camp were World War II veterans, introspective men. Some carried shrapnel in their bodies. One had a metal plate in his head, that roof. Whatever you said to them, they seemed to be thinking of something else, even when they answered. But step out of line, and a plastic lanyard whistled, burning notice across your ass. At night, lying in the bunkhouse, I listened to owls. I'd never before heard that sound, the sound of darkness, blooming, opening inside you like a mouth. I wanted proximity to darkness, strangeness, the rabbi's mouth itself, if you think about it. This is all, I only say this simply to remind you of how little you need, and you only need to know your objects to be recursive. But when he does that, the rabbi flew to the window, a red mouth opening in his beard, and out of it comes this deadly murderers. That's also could be seen as a rewriting of a woman's part. So out of that comes that. So you see how tight this story is and how quickly it makes its turns. When you make turns that fast, when you, I love, nobody loved, lover, the story's going to be shorter. However extremely you do that. In any event, that is that story. And I'm just going to conclude with a little teeny list of things. All right. So, from this crafty talk, know your opening well. To know it and to know what drives the story. To see where the story starts. Sometimes, of course, you really think you've got your opening paragraph, you've worked it all out, and as we've discussed, all of us in all of our workshops, it will start later. But once you're sure, you're kind of fixed on it, and you think this is it, do know it very well. Know what things you can reverse and how you can use them. Think, how can I darken and deepen? And that's the first gesture I can make to turn away from what I've just put forward. And then when you remember you're lost, go back to your opening paragraph. Remember the driving sentence. And you do that when you're looking for your title as well. You go back, you look at your opening, you study it, and titles are another way into a story. They're not just the things that most of us say, I'm so lousy at titles. We're all lousy at titles. It takes forever to find a good one. Find one you like in your mouth. Find one you like to say. I love the long one. So much water, so close to home. That's a beauty, right? But some of them are portrait stories and they just have the name. Sometimes when they just have the name that way, that's rather plain. And if it's a portrait story, do hope that your prose is kind of beefed up. All right, that's it. Coming to the end. of the sentence involves looking at the terms in the first always and asking yourself which term will deliver me to the bigger, better, harder place. Thank you.